Hi, folks. With Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. I've had to do a bit of traveling and business work, and also had a few technical problems, which is why I haven't uploaded in a little while. In this essay, I'd like to talk about uh, various activists and groups in primarily the United States, but elsewhere in the 1950s that were late 1940s, I suppose you could see it, but particularly in 1950s, it picked up speed. And going into the 1960s, of course, and beyond, up to including the present day, groups of activists that were trying to change the use of entertainment. So TV brought I guess, a new dimension to entertainment, that you had audio and visual, and this was going to put a lot of families in their lounge rooms watching television after they, came home from school or came home from work or something like that. So there'd be, mum, dad, and the kids and everything around the TV. So this was seen as an opportunity for delivering propaganda, and it just couldn't be passed up. And no activist is going to miss an opportunity like this. Now, most, not all, but most of the TV programming, or even movies for that matter, was built around entertainment. So if you entertain the people, if you've got shows that they want to see, then you've got the eyeballs, you've got the advertising, and which in turn will fund the programs and the TV stations. So it was a kind of a happy arrangement, and there wasn't really a whole lot of propaganda around. You can certainly find that there was propaganda, of course, during World War II. The idea of like raising, getting people to buy government bonds, and you're getting people to enlist, and saying that we're fighting for a just cause. There was propaganda there, but TV wasn't really around at the time. So you've got to get people to go to the movie theatre, or maybe through the radio and so on. But TV brought a new dimension, and so the new form of propaganda was being developed. Now, I hadn't been aware until I was well into adulthood, just how much propaganda and control there was. For example, the guys around Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, he had quite a large sort of Jewish clique around him. There's a few hangers-on, black lesbians and the like, but primarily it was a Jewish gig. And if you look at the sort of scripts that this group was pitching to the studios, that were mainly run by Jewish people, by the way. If you look at the sort of the scripts, the shows, the concepts of, a program or a movie or anything like that at all, it had very heavy social justice elements, and these elements were to reduce the prominence of straight white males, to elevate women and minorities into positions of authority and power, to make straight white males look stupid and incompetent, to, by comparison, make minorities look capable and urbane and sophisticated and so on. And so if we look at, say, Star Trek as a case in point, this is the mid 1960s version of Star Trek, which I think first got to see it, I don't know, 10 years old or something like that. And this was by that stage, it was, the reruns and so on. But I thought it was kind of cool, they were in outer space and this, that, and the next thing. And so you look past the obviously very, pretty tight special effects budgets that look quite cringeworthy today. But nonetheless, it was kind of exciting, all those flashing lights and phasers and beam me up, Scotty, and all that sort of thing. So, but most people sort of wouldn't know that pretty much the entire creative and production team, the people that conceived it, were all Jewish. William Shatner, the two lead actors, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, were both Jewish. And there were various other Jewish characters in primary roles. They had that black chick who was like the communications person on the radio, as it were, and there again other Jewish people. If you look at the prominent people who were brought in to play various roles, again, a very sort of heavy Jewish presence in that, but also pushing this idea of a world where, we're in the Cold War and communism is a big thing, but we're looking at a future where the Russians are playing key roles in the Starship. There's an Asian homosexual is showing his cultured sort of side. So we're not frightened of Chinese or Russians or communists or anything. We're all friends in the future. Women are holding managerial positions and so on. So this is, having a look at that as a kid, I sort of looked past it. Didn't really sort of matter much to me. But this idea of pushing this, okay, it's a story about the space and Star Trek and going out into other galaxies, and that's okay. I'm into that. Why were they pushing this? Why was there so much social engineering in and around that? As a kid, you don't necessarily see it, but if you look at sort of the private lives of William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and the other Jewish people involved in the show, Gene Roddenberry, they very much had at the forefront, very much at the forefront of their mind, the Holocaust, how Jews have been mistreated throughout, as they would see it, mistreated throughout the centuries for no reason other than straight white Christian males just hate Jews. That's it. There's no other reason for it. So, and why are black people oppressed? Because of slavery, because of those evil white people. So all roads sort of came back to the straight white Christian male is really the main bad guy. We don't need to worry about the communist and the Marxist and the Joseph Stalins or the Chairman Mao's or any. No, that's what the real enemy, the enemy for society. The real enemy is the straight white Christian males. Now, part of that is because Jewish society has really, or the Ashkenazi Jews, if you like, in the generic sense, they've all gravitated towards white societies. They haven't gone into the middle of nowhere in Africa and tried to build a society. They've very much gravitated towards where wealth already exists. And so, and this is where they've come to grief in throughout the centuries. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it's nothing's really changed there. But their perception is that if we can change the world and how it functions and how society, Western society, white society, Christian society, if we can change how it functions, then we'll be okay. But to do that, we have to create the idea that straight white males, Gentile Christian society is oppressing all minorities, of which we are one. So if we can remove their ability to oppress anybody, neutralize them completely, then we will be rescued from these never-ending oppressions that reach across centuries. So that's their wider cognizance. Now, if you look at sort of William Shatner talking about his childhood, and he believes that he hung around with the sort of the Jewish gang, but he believes they were being, as children, were being oppressed. I think it was in Canada in his case. They were being oppressed because they were Jewish, and it was the Christians that were doing it. Leonard Nimoy the same, and indeed the other Jew, Gene Roddenberry. And if you look at the people all around Gene Roddenberry, or certainly many of them, that Jewish sort of crowd that he was running with, they also had that. And again, with the Holocaust fresh on their minds, everybody knew someone who'd lost a relative in the Holocaust. So it was, how can we make the world a better place? Well, we can just stop these straight white Christian males from doing bad things. How can we do that? Neutralize their power. How can we do that? Well, then we have to reshape society. So one sort of view of how what needed to be done would beget the next view, and then it was, well, we just have to neutralize straight white male Christian power all across the white Western world, where we the Jews are located. So pretty much everything was pitched with the idea of social engineering. I don't think there was an entertainment script idea or concept that was pitched that didn't contain serious social engineering stuff from these Jews. Now, they had the studios and the people that were going to sign off on the budgets to do this were also mostly Jewish. They had a slightly different view. Sure, they were, gave a sympathetic ear to these people, the Gene Roddenberry type crowd, but they still had a bottom line to think about. So that sort of knocked on the head quite a lot of the more outlandish. That'll never fly. Oh no, we can't have black lesbian leads on this. But if you look at all the programs where they say the head cop was black or the head cop was female or a minority, where straight white Christian males were being removed from the most prominent roles or the roles that presumably had the most power, they still could have a straight white Gentile playing the lead role, but then his boss and boss's boss and all those things, they all had to be black or lesbian or women or so. So the social engineering was pretty intense and starting off sort of fairly tame at first. But I, even as a young sort of teenager, I was like, why are they putting a woman in as the police chief? They're trying to create a world. They're not reflecting the world as is, or even going to the fantasy type world of James Bond, where James Bond sort of beats up all the bad guys or something. It still has an element, a long bow being a bit of a stretch here. It still has an element of plausibility. This doesn't. And I remember watching a TV show when I was a teenager, and there was this scrawny woman in there who was going around beating up all the 250-pound muscled out dudes. And I thought, that's ridiculous. That's bullshit. Now that was tamed down a little bit during the 60s, where the big tough chick would run around in a swimsuit and she was hot, and so you could kind of forget about that. But it added an element of the ridiculous to it, which if you're seeing the hot chick karate chop away 3 million guys and go, wow, that chick's hot, and you kind of forget about the social engineering aspect of it. But what I think surprised me, do your own research on this, but if you go back and look at the ideas that were being pitched, they are absolutely shot through with social engineering, propaganda and concepts. But it comes back to, if you then look at the writings and the interviews and the comments by the Gene Roddenberry type crowd, but we have to make the world a better place. We must make the world a better place. Well, what does that mean, a better place? Does it mean you're going to find the cure for cancer or something? What does that mean? Well, what it means is that we have this strange equity notion where if we elevate all minorities, but de-elevate straight white Christian males who built all the wealth, who built all these advanced technology countries and have these stable, well-run, well-managed societies, if we neutralize all their power and influence, then all these minorities, of which we, the Jews, are very much a part, we will be saved and rescued from oppressions for all time. So this was their naive, childlike, crazy notion. And it'll bring about in the end the destruction of all of us. They're out to re-engineer the world to make it a better place, but end up we'll all be destroyed by this madness. But it went back to the 1950s, and you could even say earlier than that, within the movie industry, but certainly from a TV perspective. And you gradually see these, the introduction of, but it didn't stop. If they would pitch a script or an idea about, the female police chief who beats up all the guys 10 times the size, if you look at that pitching there, if they got rejected or knocked back, they would just come back with something just slightly tamer. They're always pushing the boundaries to the max of introducing minorities into these prominent roles, not because it was the real world, not because it was reality in any way, not because it was enjoyable, entertaining fantasy, but to re-engineer. That was their objective all the way along, and they're always putting forward as much as they thought they could get away with. I was again surprised to look back. I remember. Do you remember? I don't know if any of you saw reruns of Gilligan's Island, which I thought was funny. Some of the episodes were quite good. A very Jewish take on Gentile society, but nonetheless, Ginger, who was, I thought Ginger was smoking hot, by the way. I didn't know she was Jewish. Now, a lot of the actors and actresses and people involved had sort of, anglicized, Christianized, whatever you want to call it, their names. so that I didn't know that William Shatner was Jewish, for example. Not that it mattered or that I cared, but it was more that the Jewish production team, they were finding as many Jews as they could to slot into the program, and people who believed in the social engineering concept of the world, and that was important. So when you get a whole cluster of people coming, say, yeah, we've got to re-engineer society. That's our duty as Jews, to make the world a better place. But the only losers out of this, in the first instance, are straight white Christian males in particular. But over the longer term, again, as I've said, it'll destroy us all. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.